June 1944. A French railway worker finishes his lunch, steps behind a signal box and crushes a small brass tube with his boot heel. A faint metallic snap inside the copper sleeve. Then nothing. He slips the tube into a lump of putty-shaped explosive, presses the package against a rail joint, and walks home. 3 hours later, he is eating dinner with his family when the night express to Normandy derails 6 miles away. German investigators find nothing but twisted metal and scattered brass fragments the size of a pencil. This wasn't just one man's act of defiance. In the darkness before D-Day, SOE records show resistance networks executed hundreds upon hundreds of coordinated strikes across the French rail system, with widely reported estimates suggesting 577 rail cuts that single night. The resistance destroyed hundreds of locomotives in a devastating blow to German logistics. An elite SS Panzer division found itself trapped on the roads for approximately 2 weeks, unable to reach the invasion beaches in time. And the tool that enabled this chaos? Something so ordinary-looking you could mistake it for a child's school supply. The British nicknamed it the time pencil. To the Germans, it became an unsolvable enigma that haunted their every move. British intelligence faced a brutal paradox in 1940 that seemed to have no answer. France had collapsed under German boots. Throughout occupied Europe, countless willing fighters burned with the desire to resist but possessed no practical means to strike back effectively. Traditional explosives came with an impossible choice: stay close enough to manually detonate and die in the blast, or rely on intricate timing devices far too complex for untrained civilians to operate. Mechanical clockwork timers drained resources, broke easily under rough handling, and worst of all, their rhythmic ticking could expose an agent the moment German soldiers searched their belongings at a checkpoint. Battery-powered electrical alternatives presented their own headaches, with power cells that degraded unpredictably after spending months concealed in cold barns or damp cellars. What the resistance desperately needed was a tool stripped down to its essence, utterly silent in operation, foolproof enough for factory workers and farmers, reliable enough to bet lives on. The breakthrough emerged from Station 12, a commandeered country manor known as Aston House, sitting in the Hertfordshire countryside near Stevenage. This became the beating heart of SOE's experimental weapons development, where brilliant minds collaborated to forge the instruments that would fulfill Churchill's stirring vision of setting Europe ablaze through unconventional warfare. The genius behind the time pencil was Lieutenant Commander A.G.G. Langley, who served as Station 12's first commandant. After the war ended, the British Royal Commission on Awards to Inventors formally recognized Langley's achievement, noting that his design accomplished something genuinely extraordinary, creating a dependable delay mechanism that relied purely on chemical reactions and fundamental physics, with no moving parts to maintain or batteries to replace. The finished device measured precisely 5 inches in length, with a diameter of 5/16 of an inch, dimensions carefully chosen to mimic an everyday writing pencil. Its body consisted of a straightforward brass tube weighing approximately half an ounce, though manufacturers later developed lighter variants that barely tipped the scales at just over half an ounce for agents who needed to carry multiple units. Hidden within this deceptively ordinary cylinder were 3 elegantly simple components working in perfect harmony. A delicate copper sleeve housed a sealed glass ampule containing cuprit chloride solution. A steel striker sat compressed under spring tension, restrained by a slender metal wire. A percussion cap waited at the base, ready to ignite the moment it received impact. The activation process required absolutely no power source, no intricate mechanisms, no electrical systems of any kind. An operative simply applied pressure to the copper section using whatever tool came to hand, pliers grabbed from a workshop, or even just the heel of their boot brought down hard. This crushing force shattered the fragile glass ampule sealed inside, releasing the corrosive chemical solution. The cuprit chloride immediately began its silent work, methodically dissolving the restraining wire atom by atom. When that wire finally gave way, anywhere from minutes to hours after activation, depending on which variant was used, the compressed spring violently released its stored energy, driving the striker downward into the waiting percussion cap. The cap flashed to life, triggering the detonator, which in turn set off the main explosive charge. The entire sequence from activation to detonation proceeded in absolute silence, producing no fizzing sounds, no mechanical ticking, no distinctive chemical smell that might alert a passing patrol, just invisible molecular destruction working inexorably toward its conclusion while the saboteur disappeared into the countryside. SOE weapons specialists developed an intuitive, color-coded identification system using removable safety strips that indicated precise delay intervals. Black strips marked 10-minute fuses, reserved strictly for training exercises where quick detonation was acceptable. Red indicated 30 minutes of delay time. White strips gave operatives a 2-hour window. Green provided 5.5 hours before detonation. Yellow offered a 12-hour delay for operations requiring agents to be far away when the explosion occurred. Blue signified a full 24-hour countdown, perfect for establishing airtight alibis. The delay duration was determined primarily by carefully adjusting the concentration and chemical composition of the corrosive solution sealed inside each ampule. Field agents memorized these color associations until they became second nature, then destroyed the identifying safety strips immediately after crushing the fuse to prevent German intelligence from reconstructing timing patterns if devices were discovered before detonation. But this elegant system harbored one critical weakness that nearly altered the course of history on multiple occasions. Basic chemistry dictates that chemical reactions decelerate dramatically in freezing conditions, while accelerating rapidly when exposed to heat. SOE technical instruction manuals included detailed correction charts revealing alarming timing variations that could mean the difference between escape and capture. A red-coded delay rated for 30 minutes of countdown at 15 degrees Celsius would stretch to a dangerous 75 minutes if deployed in -20-degree winter cold, yet shrink to a mere 9 minutes when used in 43-degree summer heat. Field operatives working through harsh winters or sweltering summers had to mentally recalculate their escape windows based on ambient temperature, factoring in weather conditions that could shift hour by hour. And, inevitably, under the stress of operating behind enemy lines with death waiting at every checkpoint, some agents miscalculated the temperature adjustments and paid with their lives. The time pencil proved its devastating potential on the night of June 7, 1941, in an operation that demonstrated precision sabotage could achieve what massive bombing campaigns could not. Free French operatives targeted the transformer station at Pessac on the outskirts of Bordeaux, a facility that pumped electrical power into German submarine bases and critical war production factories. Agents Raymond Cabot, André Vonnier, and Joel Latac methodically placed magnetic incendiary devices equipped with time pencil delays onto 8 separate transformers, moving through the facility with practiced efficiency. The entire infiltration, placement, and extraction took less than half an hour before the agents vanished into the night. 6 of those 8 transformers erupted in flames and twisted metal exactly when planned. The Italian submarine base operating out of Bordeaux found itself without electrical power for weeks, crippling maintenance operations and forcing submarines to remain docked. Electric railways throughout the region were forced to revert to older, less efficient steam locomotives, creating cascading delays throughout the German supply network. The damage proved so extensive that repairs dragged on for over a year, a single night's work yielding 12 months of disruption. Hugh Dalton, serving as Minister of Economic Warfare, wrote an enthusiastic letter to Churchill arguing that industrial facilities were more effectively neutralized through SOE's surgical sabotage methods than through the RAF's carpet bombing approach that killed civilians while often missing critical machinery. The superiority of targeted sabotage over indiscriminate bombing became undeniable after the Peugeot factory incident at Sochaux in July 1943. RAF bombers attempting to destroy this German-controlled facility killed 125 French civilians in their attack while causing relatively minimal damage to the actual production machinery. SOE agent Captain Harry Ree saw an opportunity for a better approach and made direct contact with factory owner Raoul Peugeot, presenting him with an ultimatum that left no middle ground. Accept cooperation with precisely targeted sabotage using time pencils and plastic explosive to destroy specific machines while protecting workers, or face continued RAF bombing raids that would inevitably kill more French civilians without guaranteeing the factory's destruction. Pigot, faced with this stark choice between controlled sabotage and random death from above, provided detailed factory blueprints identifying the most critical machines and connected the agents with trusted workers on the inside. In November 1943, operatives and sympathetic factory employees placed explosive charges on essential compressors and transformers, each equipped with delayed fuses, giving everyone time to evacuate. The facility, which manufactured tank components vital to the German war effort, was rendered inoperative. Not a single civilian died in the operation. The RAF agreed to remove cooperating factories from their target lists, recognizing that precision sabotage achieved military objectives without the political cost of French casualties. But the time pencil's finest moment arrived on the eve of D-Day, when the BBC transmitted 210 coded action phrases across their radio broadcasts on June 5, 1944, each phrase activating a different resistance cell across France. SOE networks and the French resistance launched Plan Vert, a carefully orchestrated assault on the entire French railway infrastructure designed to cut Normandy off from German reinforcements rushing to repel the Allied invasion. The devastation rippled across France in a single coordinated wave. Within 24 hours, SOE controllers and resistance networks documented hundreds of successful rail cuts, with official post-war records commonly citing that 577 cuts occurred during that single night of synchronized chaos. In southeastern France alone, 52 locomotives were reduced to smoking wreckage on June 6th. By June 7th, Normandy had become effectively isolated from the rest of France, a railway island that German reinforcements could not reach by rail. Long-distance rail transport faced relentless interruptions throughout the period from June through September 1944, completely paralyzing German logistics networks across occupied France and forcing the Wehrmacht to rely on vulnerable road transport. Pearl Witherington stands as the only woman to command an SOE network operating inside France during the occupation, leading her wrestler circuit of between 2,000 and 3,500 Maquis fighters in a campaign of unrelenting railway destruction. Her forces caused over 800 railway interruptions along the vital Paris-Bordeaux corridor, severing one of Germany's most important north-south supply routes. The Germans placed a bounty of 1 million francs on her head, a price that reflected both her effectiveness and their desperation to stop her operations. Over 4 months of sustained combat, her network inflicted approximately 1,000 casualties on German forces through ambushes, raids, and sabotage operations. The campaign culminated when her forces accepted the surrender of 18,000 German troops, an entire division laying down their arms to a woman the British establishment initially dismissed as unsuitable for field operations. When Britain offered her a civil MBE after victory was secured, Witherington rejected the honor with words that captured the brutal reality of resistance warfare, stating bluntly that there was nothing remotely civil about what she had done. The most compelling evidence of the time pencil's strategic impact emerged from tracking the 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, an elite formation that should have crushed the Allied beachhead in its vulnerable first days. This powerful force of 15,000 veteran soldiers, equipped with over 200 tanks, was stationed near Toulouse when intelligence reached them that the invasion had begun. The distance to Normandy measured roughly 750 kilometers by rail, a journey that under normal circumstances should have required only 3 days of travel to transport the entire division with its armor intact. SOE agent Major Tony Brooks, deployed to France at the remarkably young age of just 20 years, had spent months preparing for precisely this moment. His Pimento network systematically sabotaged the specialized railway flat cars required to transport heavy tanks by pouring abrasive lubricant into the axle boxes that kept the wheels turning smoothly. The wheels seized and froze after traveling just a few miles, rendering entire trains of flat cars useless for tank transport. Das Reich found itself forced to abandon rail transport entirely and travel by road instead, where French resistance fighters, armed with time pencils and explosives, transformed their journey into a running nightmare of ambushes, demolished bridges, and severed fuel lines. The division that should have reinforced the Normandy front by June 9th did not arrive until late June, with many historical estimates placing the delay at roughly 17 days of precious time. By then, the Allied bridgehead had been reinforced and firmly established. The critical window for a German counterattack slammed shut.
Ein Panzerdivision blantet und neutralisiert, weil ein Brastub, der Size eines Pencils, hatte geben Fährmann und Factory Workern den Power zu wagen mechanisierte Warfare einer modernen Armee. German forces captured numerous time pencils from SOE agents throughout the war years, recovering intact examples from failed operations and dead agents. Yet German ordnance departments never adopted an identical chemical delay fuse for widespread distribution to their own forces. German military engineering remained fixated on precision clockwork mechanisms und electrical timing systems für Aeriebomben und Demolitionen, apparently viewing der krude Simplizität eines Device aktiviert by crushing it underfoot als beneath their standards of engineering excellence. What German planners katastrophisch fehlte zu greifen, war, dass dies apparente Krudheit repräsentierte der Devices größte Strength, nicht eine Limitation. Ein Tool, rekurrierend nur ein Boot hier zu aktivieren, konnte bei literal jedem nach 5 Minuten Instruktion operiert werden, keine technische Training erforderlich, no specialized tools needed. Der Time Pencil demokratisierte die Power der Zerstörung in ways das German Engineering Philosophie mit its emphasis auf Precision und Expertise fundamental could not comprehend or counter. Every farmer became a potential saboteur, every railway worker ein threat, every factory employee a possible resistance operative. Captured British time pencils did find one infamous application in German hands. On March 13, 1943, German military conspirators attempted to assassinate Adolf Hitler using British chemical fuses obtained through murky intelligence channels und black market contacts. Major General Henning von Tresckow smuggled eine Bombe, cunningly disguised als bottles of Cointreau liquor, aboard Hitlers persönlichem Aircraft, als es bereit zu departen von Smolensk war. Lieutenant Fabian von Schlabrendorf crushed the 30-minute fuse zu aktivieren den Timer und casual handed the package to Hitlers aide, who placed it in the cargo hold for the flight back to Berlin. Der aircraft landed safely in Berlin hours later, with Hitler completely unaware of how close death had passed. The bomb never exploded.
Subsequent investigation by the conspirators revealed that the acid had corroded through the restraining wire exactly as the British engineers had designed, but the percussion cap failed to ignite in the extreme cold of the unheated cargo hold at high altitude, the same temperature sensitivity that SOE manuals warned about. The same batch of explosives and the remaining time pencils from this cache were incorporated into the July 20, 1944 briefcase bomb plot. That time, the chemical fuse functioned flawlessly, triggering the explosion with perfect timing. Hitler survived purely through random chance, alive only because someone moved the briefcase behind a heavy oak table leg moments before detonation, the thick wood absorbing enough blast force to spare his life. Production statistics reveal the confidence British intelligence placed in Langley's design. The initial manufacturing run of 3,700 time pencils was delivered in September 1939, operational and ready for field deployment before the war was even a month old. By August 1940, over 67,000 units had been supplied to auxiliary units, Britain's secret stay-behind resistance force preparing to wage guerrilla warfare if German invasion forces successfully landed on British soil. Wartime production scaled up to truly staggering levels, running into the millions of units. Historical estimates vary considerably, with some wartime production records and post-war accounts suggesting manufacturing figures as high as 12 million units, demonstrating just how extensively the device was distributed throughout every corner of occupied Europe. Millions of silent chemical countdowns taking place simultaneously, each one representing the potential to derail a supply train, obliterate a factory, or eliminate an enemy officer. The weapon that paralyzed occupied France secured its place in military history not through technological sophistication or engineering complexity, but through elegant simplicity that anyone could master. Commander Langley's creation at Station 12 accomplished what massive strategic bombing campaigns consuming countless resources could not achieve: the precision destruction of military assets with minimal civilian casualties, executed by ordinary citizens who could disappear back into the general population afterward without leaving traces.
A railway worker could crush the copper tube during his lunch break while hidden behind a signal box, insert it into plastic explosive molded around a rail joint, and return home to eat dinner with his family when the night express derailed miles away hours later. German investigators arriving at the scene found no perpetrators to arrest, no witnesses willing to talk, no evidence remaining beyond scattered fragments of brass tubing that revealed nothing about who had planted the device or when. Paranoia metastasized through the occupation forces like a disease with no cure. Every Frenchman became a suspect, every interaction potentially dangerous, every routine supply movement a calculated risk. The shadow war became fundamentally unwinnable for the occupiers because the enemy was simultaneously everyone and no one, an entire population transformed into potential combatants. 5 inches of brass tubing, a glass vial of corrosive acid, a spring-loaded striker held under tension. These basic components formed the weapon that crippled the French railway network for months. This was the weapon that came within a frozen percussion cap of killing Adolf Hitler on 2 separate occasions. The Germans possessed panzer tanks that could crush resistance, Stuka dive bombers that struck terror from the skies, and V-2 rockets that represented the cutting edge of missile technology. The British countered with a pencil that anyone could use, and that pencil helped win the war.